So today, as part of our series, the Payments Geek Roundtable, we have been joined by the inimitable, the extraordinary Reed Luhtanen of the U.S. Faster Payments Council, and I am thrilled to have you. So I'm Bruce Parker. I'm the founder and CEO of Modo Payments, which is a payments orchestration platform that operates in the cloud. You've heard that before. Enough about me. Reed, U.S. Faster Payments Council, and I think, didn't you work at there was a little retailer, I think, somewhere in your background as well. Tell us about yourself. Tell us about how you came to be at U.S. Faster Payments Council, if you don't mind.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Bruce. Thanks for having me here. Excited to be here on the Payments Geek webinar this morning. So, like Bruce said, Reed Luhtanen. I'm the executive director at the Faster Payments Council. I've been here for, I think, about 3 months now. So pretty much know exactly everything that I'm supposed to be doing. But prior to that, I was at a company here in Bentonville, Arkansas called Walmart, local merchant based here where I live.
Local merchant. Perfect.
And worked on.
You need to unlock your iPhone first.
I need to unlock my iPhone, according to Siri. So sorry about that, guys.
Oh, good. Siri's just jumping in.
Yeah.
And in fact, we've got our first question. So I'll let you finish your introduction. But your first question is about your introduction.
Oh, it's about Siri. Great. So at Walmart, I was responsible for various payments acceptance products over the course of about 12 years that I worked on the payments acceptance team, debit, prepaid, gift cards, government benefits, and then just kind of all the payments wrapped together in kind of a strategy and industry relations role for the last 4 or 5 years. And that led me to the Faster Payments Council. Perfect.
Wonderful. So the first question in so far is, Reed, how long are you going to grow your beard?
It's a question that the answer changes just about every day.
Oh, wow.
I will trim it back. I get objections from folks here in the house, especially the little ones. They don't like it when it gets too short. I think they're worried that they're going to see too much of my face.
Ah, very good. That's a good answer. Very, very good answer. Okay, well, so just to remind everybody, I think we're now at nearly full steam on the participation front. Today's session is going to be a series of question and answers. We're styling it after some certain television show. We're calling it the Payments Feud. And we would love to see your Q&A show up in the Q&A. And somebody just fired it, Lou, he's a regular. He just fired in a question inside the chat. You can do that too. But what I was going to tell you is there's a Q&A button. You can fire your questions in there, and then we can kind of keep track of them. And then if you want to clap back, if you want to interact, if you want us to respond live and in color, then fire into the chat. So questions in Q&A, chat is for clap back, and we'll try and do live fire stuff. I'm just worried, Lou, that things are going to stream off the page if we get enough rolling through them. Okay, so we'll start off a little bit slow and help everybody understand the format here today. Help me figure out whether or not I've got all my buttons set up correctly. Reed, first question, really, really simple. RTP, does that stand for request to pay?
It's interesting. It sort of depends on where you are. In the United States, the answer to that question is no. But in Europe, RTP does mean request to pay. So in Europe, where they've been doing faster payments for quite some time, and they call most of their systems either faster payments or various names specific to their country, they have a functionality that they call request to pay, and they call it RTP. Here in the United States, we of course have a major provider named RTP, or for real-time payments. And so to keep things extra simple, they came up with request for payment, RFP. And so now I'm sure nobody's confused about any of that.
That's right. Well, given that we are here in the U.S., this webinar is clearly domiciled in the U.S., we're going to say this first answer on the Payments Feud. Everything you think you know about faster payments is wrong. We're going to go with a Reed Luhtanen says, no, RTP does not stand for request to pay. It stands for real-time payments, and that's how we will use it throughout the course of the day. So now you guys understand. You can fight back in the chat. You can send the Q&A in through the Q&A. Question number next. What is the role of the U.S. Faster Payments Council?
Yeah, it's not surprisingly a question I get a lot. So the U.S. Faster Payments Council was created by a cross-industry group called the Governance Framework Formation Team that was convened by the Federal Reserve. Our purpose is to bring together all the different stakeholder groups who are interested in payments. So that includes business end users, includes financial institutions, technology providers, network providers, trade associations, consultancies. Pretty much anybody who's interested in payments is welcome to join the Faster Payments Council. And so our mission is to advance the ubiquity and usability of faster payments, to make it easier for folks who haven't yet adopted faster payments to do so, and to make it easier for folks to use the faster payments systems that are available to them, whether those are consumers or businesses.
Awesome. So I think this person probably thought when they asked this question that RTP and faster payments were kind of the same thing. Reed Luhtanen says, no, not the same thing. Definitely different. Definitely two different roles for the network operator versus somebody who's helping people to figure out how to use them. Okay, let's keep going. And hopefully people are getting the hang of all of this and understand. Again, ask the questions in the Q&A and clap back in the chat. So the clearinghouse claims that well over half of the DDAs in the United States can now receive a real-time payment, or RTP, but the flip side of that is that nearly half can't. So how do we get the other 5,000 credit unions and 4,000 community banks? And I don't know about all those numbers, but those are good numbers, big numbers. Smaller banks, smaller institutions, smaller credit unions who hold the rest of all of those accounts to adopt RTP, or at least put RTP in their strategic plans.
Yeah, I guess I'd start off by saying, in the US, like I mentioned before, RTP is a trademark that's owned by the clearinghouse, and it refers specifically to their particular real-time payments system. So when I'm talking about instant payments or faster payments, I'm talking much more broadly than just that one single offering. Now, what I'll say is, certainly there are different financial institutions have adopted Zelle or Visa Direct or MasterCard Send, and those all add to the potential options that are available in the marketplace for folks who are interested in doing faster payments, whether or not they're particularly interested in engaging with the clearinghouse and using RTP, which of course is also an available product in the market. Now, what I will say is, regardless of all of that, what's really important, and what we're hearing more and more from folks on the provider side, is that whether you intend to implement faster payments very quickly, or even 2 or 3 or 4 years, which you think is maybe not very quickly down the road, really now is the time where it's critical that you get out there and you learn what you need to do, develop your strategy based on accurate information, and have the educational materials available to you to do that. And those are some of the things that we're really focusing on at the Faster Payments Council, is making sure that the information is available for folks so they can make informed decisions about when and how and with whom they develop their faster payment strategy and move forward.
So I think what this question asker was asking means that they think that there's a lot of work to be done by somebody over the course of the next few years to make that case. And it sounds like Reed Luhtanen says, yes, there is. And in fact, that's what the U.S. Faster Payments Council is doing.
Hey,
Awesome.
You got one right, Bruce.
They got one right. So not everything, we may have exaggerated. We said everything you think you know about faster payments is wrong. A little bit of an exaggeration, but we got one out of, what are we at? That was just 3 so far. Yeah. We've got a lot of questions rolling in. I have a feeling that the win rate's going to be relatively low. But again, clap back in chat. Okay. So here's a little bit of fight. Let's see how this goes. If Nacha, those other guys, become an interoperability rules body, which I think they're saying some things to some people about some stuff, and some expect that, this question asker says, as some expect, then does the Faster Payments Council continue to exist in perpetuity? Existing in perpetuity sounds kind of cool, actually. And if so, if yes, what would be the intended purpose of the Faster Payments Council if NACHA is the interoperability rules body to rule them all, the one ring? So,
quite a bit to unpack there, Bruce.
Yeah, there's a little bit going on there. They're kind of shots fired, I think.
Okay, so we'll start off with Nacha. Nacha is actually a member of the Faster Payments Council, so we don't view them as a competitor in this space or anything like that. They're, in fact, Jane Larimer was on my board until about a month ago. So not, we have a very good relationship with Nacha, and in fact, we're collaborating on a Faster Payments playbook, which you can access from our website and also from theirs. So a lot of good material that we've collaborated with them to create for the industry. So that's one thing. In terms of the interoperability question, I'll be honest, I don't honestly see a path right now for any third party to force themselves into the space of being a rules-making body to force interoperability upon the Fed or the clearinghouse in the near or even medium term. Obviously that would require that those folks consent to it. And they're busy building out their system and making it something that people can use and delivering the products that they're hearing from their advisory groups that are necessary in the marketplace, and working and engaging with folks like the Faster Payments Council and with Nacha to figure out what it is that's needed in the market. I think the theoretical conversation about rules is an interesting one, but it's also one that isn't necessarily required to be had on day one when you're talking about building out entirely new rails for the first time in 50 years. That being said, the FPC was not created specifically to create and cause network level interoperability to occur. That's not one of our foundational things that we're working on. It's one of them. It's something that is in our roadmap to talk about and work on interoperability, and happy to talk about that more broadly, because there are lots of different types of interoperability models that exist, and they doesn't necessarily require there be network level interoperability, which is a tricky one. We're working on educational materials, helping people build out their strategy on potentially tools that will make it easier for folks to use and engage with faster payments, like a QR code interface. So tons of different work going on that is not necessarily related to creating a set of rules that would somehow dictate to these large players what they're going to do.
All right. So I think what this person who's asking this question is thinking is that Faster Payments Council is somehow focused entirely or exclusively on network interoperability. So if Nacha comes and takes your cookies off your plate, then you have no more cookies. But Reed Luhtanen says, no, what you're thinking is not right. All right, let's switch up a little bit in terms of roles and so on. I think we covered a lot. That's great. Let's switch into more operational questions. We're getting two live fire questions in two kind of different directions, although there's a little bit of similarity between these two. I can't remember whether we were supposed to tell everybody what the names are. I can see some of the names, and I recognize both of these people. But I'm going to read this question here. There is a whole infrastructure around credit and debit payments, contact centers, specialized departments that handle disputes, specialized departments that track and manage fraud. Similar but different systems and departments need to be built for this new form of payments. Is this something, or this area, something that the Faster Payments Council is doing anything about?
Absolutely, no doubt about it. So this is exactly the sort of thing that we all need to be working on together. There's no reason for each individual business, as they try to figure out how to implement faster payments, to go through the pain of figuring out, what are these different processes that need to exist, right? So when you think about a lot of payment types, there's off the shelf, pretty clear what you need to be doing, and rule sets and all that stuff. One of the nice things about, faster payments, at least many of them, is that you really are entering into more of a one-on-one relationship with your customer through the direct bank payment methods that are becoming available. And so, it's beautiful in a lot of ways. It removes some friction in between your customer and you, if you're a business end user. On the flip side, that means that there is this whole need for things to be built out in terms of the set of the suite of tools that are needed to reconcile and handle disputes and erroneous payments and things like that. And that's exactly the sweet spot for how the FPC can help, right? We bring together the financial institutions who are going to be delivering the payment options to their customers through their bank apps or through their online banking, the technology providers who you work with already as a merchant, FIS, Fiserv, all the different payment service providers on. And then also the payment networks are here too. And it's that's what the value that we can add is bringing that collaboration together, making that happen. So yeah, I agree with that person. So you can.
All right, Reed Luhtanen says, what you're thinking about what Faster Payments Council is doing is in fact correct. Well, let's continue our transition to the more operational stuff. This question is, can you discuss the compliance and fraud control, including payment rollbacks complexities with faster payments? So I think this person's zeroing in on specifically those two issues within the broad infrastructure question that our last question was talking about.
Yeah, and that's a question that's difficult to answer because faster payments, as I talked about earlier, doesn't necessarily need any one particular network or one particular offering, right? So there's going to be varied answers depending on what network you have and you're working with and what their rules are, right? So that's the initial answer is it depends, which is something that when I went to law school, I learned very quickly that's the first thing you're supposed to always say is it depends. But beyond that, there is a ton of work going on specifically around fraud. There's a lot of work being done by the Federal Reserve. They just put out a really interesting piece of work on defining the different types of fraud that we're actually including in a white paper that we're about to publish on fraud trends and how to combat fraud with faster payments. Because there are a lot of fraud vectors that are emerging, unfortunately, like specifically around what's happening today with COVID-19 and taking advantage of people's fears. And so we're doing some work to get the word out on some of those fraud vectors that are out there. And beyond that, I think when it comes to compliance, we're never going to be in a position to be providing folks with the legal advice that an actual real lawyer would deliver to them. But we are in the process of putting together some really good educational material to help you get oriented around what are the different regulations and laws that are potentially applicable in a faster payments environment, and where would you need to focus your research and your concerns in terms of your compliance team.
All right. So if how should we net out what our friend here is asking? I think they're asking, hey, compliance and fraud control is complex, and that's what they're thinking. So unfortunately, they're catching up. Reed, I'm feeling bad now about how we titled this thing. I think Reed Luhtanen says, yeah, it's complicated. Okay, fine. You guys are at least catching up. We got another question coming in live fire over the chat. Again, Q&A there's a questions button, Q&A button. If you want to do that, chat, you can do clap back to all of us and tell Reed that he got it entirely wrong if you want. That would be fun. So this next question is, how is the U.S. Faster Payments Council making real-time payments more competitive, given the TCH with RTP, which you've talked a lot about, as being the only solution that's available now, and then FedNow coming online in 4 years? That's maybe there's a debate as to whether or not it'll come online. How is the Faster Payments Council working with smaller startups as they create solutions to help them validate and grow? I guess those are two different things. So the first one is about competition between RTP and FedNow. Fight. And then the second one we'll handle in just a second about startups.
Yeah, so I'd start off by saying both the Fed and the Clearinghouse are members of the Faster Payments Council.
Ooh, so political. Here we go.
This is the United States, and I mentioned this before. We love to have options in terms of what we're going to be doing, and we love to have the choice of who we want to do business with, and force that competition to create efficiency and create better solutions for everybody, right? So the emergence of the Fed, I view as a good thing. It's water under the bridge in terms of them making that decision. That's done, and so there's no reason to relitigate something that's already been decided. And I think moving forward, our focus is 100% on helping all of these different providers. And this kind of will lead right into the second part of that question about, different startups and folks who are interested in getting into this space. There's room for competition here. There are plenty of folks who are established who are building solutions, and there are plenty of folks who are, startup companies who have joined our membership and are looking to, demonstrate what they can do in terms of building out a tech solution, and whether that ultimately is in service to, making it easier for folks to engage and use FedNow or use the clearinghouse's RTP or use any of the other, myriad faster payment solutions out there, XCheck or Shazam or same day ACH even can be something that folks are still interested in working on and layering onto. And so from our perspective, absolutely, the competition is the thing that will kind of spur the innovation.
Very good. Well, you know what? This is unforeseen, but these latest questions, Reed Luhtanen says, yes, more competition is good and more is more. I think that's great. And that, yes, smaller startups are viable in this process, and Faster Payments Council cares. All right. Well, I don't want to express disappointment that people are kind of thinking right things about faster payments. I don't know that was necessarily the objective. But
why did you get?
Anyways, let's keep pressing.
Why did you get so many smart people on here?
Yeah, exactly. I think we appeal to a certain crowd. The payments crowd can be truly extraordinary. Okay, so next question, more operational. This one's a softball. This one's relatively straightforward. When is RTP going to become available?
Like 2 years ago.
Ooh, shots fired. So this person who asked this question, some of these questions came in before. No, we did not write these. I can see several of our regulars in particular thinking that we came up with all these questions ahead of time ourselves. That's not true. These were submitted. So Reed Luhtanen says, no, it's already available. That's not right. So which payment flows are permitted with RTP? Is it just for B2B and or P2P flows or any other series of letters that run?
No, it is definitely not just for P2P or B2B. And I've already talked about this a little bit, but happy to elaborate. The networks were built to process the transactions that the network's customers want to process through them, right? So if you are a financial institution and you want to enable customers to use RTP or Zelle or any of these other payment systems for various use cases that aren't specifically to B2B or P2P, that's what they're there for. And in fact, I mentioned this, I think, earlier, but if not, I'll mention it now for sure. We're doing a lot of work looking at the bill pay use case and looking at how can we make it a better experience for bank customers, but also for the customers of the billers to pay their bills using online banking. So about 20% of Americans today use online banking to pay their bills. The other 80% go directly to the biller. And so there's a big group of people out there who, there's an opportunity to serve them better. And that's something that I think all sides are interested in. I think there are lots of use cases that are, there are different ways that could serve people better. And that's ultimately what we're trying to do.
All right. The next round of payments feud, Reed Luhtanen says, is RTP just for B2B and P2P? No, that was wrong. That was entirely wrong. You can use it for a bunch of stuff. All right. Now this one is really, really interesting. It's come up a little bit already, which is, and we'll just ask it in the purest form, that it was asked, can you reverse or refund an RTP?
Yeah, you can. And I guess this is specifically related, in my mind, we're answering specifically related to the clearinghouse's RTP transactions, which
because it says RTP.
Yep. The information that comes through from one financial institution to the other has what is needed to credit back the transaction if needed. Yes.
So you can, and it kind of sounds like the person who asked this question thought you couldn't. So we're going to say, Reed Luhtanen says, no, yep, you can. You can totally reverse or refund an RTP. This is another one where I think they're kind of leaning in with their shoulder on this. Can you do RTP at physical point of sale? I think they're thinking maybe that you can. Can you do it?
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, we are currently at the Faster Payments Council working on a QR code interface that would make it even easier, right? So today, I don't know that there are any live in-market point of sale RTP solutions, but absolutely it's on the roadmap for there to be. So thinking about QR codes, it's been widely adopted as the technology of preference in other markets where faster, real-time, or instant payments have been very successful.
Okay.
You look at India, you look at China, you look at lots of markets around the world. And I think the reason for that is, and not to go on a whole tangent about QR, but the reason for that is that it's the
So fun. So fun. Those nice little squares.
yeah. I mean, who doesn't like that? I do.
Everyone likes that.
But you think about it, it's really easy for folks to implement on the acceptance side. You can pretty easily adopt a QR code. In fact, if you Google it, you can find pictures of vendors in India with QR codes taped to their cart on the side of the street, and people can scan that with their app and push a payment directly to that vendor. So it's kind of a ultimate, low tech meets high tech when needed solution, but it can also be very high tech with, screens displaying QRs that are dynamic and implementations that integrate well with existing mobile banking apps.
Very, very interesting. Well, we've got all kinds of stuff flying in now here, live fire. So I'm gonna see what we can capture here. I'm gonna do the last question first, actually. Why would banks support RTP at retail point of sale, given the interchange model and consumers' preference for rewards with their cards? This is a well-framed payments geek question. Game on.
Yeah, it's a good question. It's one that I've been thinking about myself. I guess it's not for me.
From a place where perhaps you asked that question in a conference room or two. My guess.
It's possible that my previous employer is interested in the cost of payments. Yeah.
Okay.
What I'll say is, it's not for me to question the motives behind why they're doing what they're doing. But what I will say is, you look at the very largest financial institutions in the United States. They're also the folks who are the owners of the clearinghouse, and so they're the ones who made the decision years ago to develop the RTP system. They invested literally billions of dollars to make that happen. And it doesn't make sense for me that they would do that if they didn't intend for that system to ultimately be used to its fullest extent.
All right. Well, I think Reed Luhtanen says they are supporting it. So how do you like them apples? I think that's what you were saying, right? Like you were... Yeah, game on. Okay, there's actually two questions. It'll take us back just a little bit, but I want to catch them before the heat dies down. The prior question on RTP and P2P was referencing Zelle using ACH as opposed to RTP. And I think what's interesting about that is there is actually a difference from a settlement perspective. Now, that's an ultra payments geeky thing, which is RTP is a settlement mechanism as opposed to what EWS offers, what FIS offers, and what Fiserv offers. They all have their own proprietary view on settlement. And this question asker is correct in saying, hey, look, there's actually ACH under there too. What are your thoughts in terms of, maybe we'll tie it into that bank comment from before, and the previous question that you answered even earlier, what's the interplay between banks' choices of offering this kind of as a payment method externally versus what they're doing internally to support these various things that kind of ride the rails, right? That expression of, hey, how does the money move independent from what the experience looks like?
Yeah, and this is a great question to help me plug another FPC deliverable. So this works out well.
I did not know I was doing that. I was actually trying to pin you to the ground, sir. That's what I was trying to do. So I feel bad, actually. I feel like a shill.
My apologies, because it's coming.
I'm going to get you? All right. Game on.
No, the plug is coming.
Yes, go ahead. Plug away.
Okay, so really what this question is getting at is, what is the separation between the customer experience and the ultimate flow of funds, the settlement aspect of payments? And that's really a question that cuts down into the question that we were talking about before about interoperability. Mm-hmm. And, I think there's generally an impression I get from talking to people that network to network interoperability is the only type of interoperability that matters, right? So unless you have both one network connecting directly to another, you don't have interoperability. But I think Zelle is a fantastic example of another model that is, an interoperability model where it's really at the point of origination. So the user is interacting with Zelle. Zelle is interacting with various networks behind the scenes to actually cause the funds to flow. And then it's, providing real-time messaging as part of its service. And so I guess I say all that to say that if you really want to dig into and nerd out, and it sounds like the folks on this podcast might be
absolutely you are in the right place to geek out. That's for sure.
Intended audience of a payments interoperability white paper, which the Faster Payments Council Network Committee published about a month ago, and it's available for anybody, whether you're a member or not, on our website, fasterpaymentscouncil.org.
fasterpaymentscouncil.org. I'm going to do the last little interoperability question that just came up, which is from everybody's favorite. I already called him out once, so I feel like I can do it again. Lou Greeley. I want to use my Zelle app to pay the lawn guy who accepts Venmo but not Zelle. Are you working on making that happen? That sounds like we just got a Reed Luhtanen says answer on that.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're, I don't know that I'd say we're specifically focused on that exact, use case. But for sure, we're looking at how do we make it possible for folks to use the app they prefer and pay folks who are not necessarily using that same app.
As much because I know Lou so well, I'm going to call that Reed Luhtanen says. No, that's not. You're not going to be able to do that, Lou. You know better. All right. So another operational question. I think we got a couple more on this front, and then we're going to switch gears in just a moment. So just so everybody's tracking, we're talking about operational issues around faster payments, and a lot of those are about RTP, but some of them are broader than that. As Reed has been informing us, there's more to life in faster payments than just RTP. Sorry, Clearinghouse. But we now have a question which is super, super geeky. This is payments geeky, like at the highest order. How do you solve for liquidity in a real-time payments framework? Woo!
Yeah, and that might be even beyond my depth, beyond some really high level here. That's definitely a bank question, and I think that's another thing that I remember. We talked to the Fed quite a bit at the time about understanding what this was, but you'll all recall that when the Fed was going through the decision-making process that led to their Fed Now announcement, there was that sort of lesser focused on, but equally important to this questioner's point, question about, how do the banks manage their liquidity and ensure their cash positions are, sufficient to cover themselves in a 24/7 environment. And I think it's going to require a lot of rethinking by folks in terms of how they're going to do that. And part of that is going to likely be the Fed's liquidity management tool that they announced along with their announcement of Fed Now. So, I think that'll be up to each FI to make that work for themselves in concert with their providers. But, I think that's something that is definitely underway and something that people are looking at.
Yeah. In fact, we just got something in the chat about the Fed publishing a paper on exactly why they're doing that real-time gross settlement for liquidity. And I just feel like, because I had these on my desk, this is a payment-specific heads-up game, which some of you may be familiar with. Ooh. Nostro. That's one of my favorite words in payments, followed only by Vostro for obvious reasons. All right, so that question gets Reed Luhtanen says, yeah, that's a thing. That liquidity is for sure a thing, and the Fed thinks it's a thing. So we're going to dive in. We've got another interoperability question that just came in. I want to just catch up on two other operational questions that had come in prior to the webinar. You know what? Actually, I'm just going to do one. We'll do this next. I'm going to skip one just because we're running out of time. We want to get to the future, and I want to cover off. It sounds like interoperability is a big topic, and so we've got a lot of follow-up questions about it. But just before we do that, does RTP expose my bank account to fraud?
I would say that not on purpose.
Don't mean to. Yeah.
No, I'm kidding. So I guess what I would say is, to the extent you're comfortable with the fraud solutions that your bank has in place to protect your mobile banking app and your online banking portal, it would be unlikely that RTP would significantly add to your risk profile. Now, that being said, there are some different vectors and different attack, use cases or fraud. I hate to call them use cases, but different ways that fraudsters are finding to exploit the real-time nature of certain payment rails. And in fact, we're in the process of putting out another paper that really digs into some of these fraud trends and some of the different things that are being done to push back on those and make sure that folks are educated about what are these vectors, how can they be, prevented from, exploiting their customers. But I mean, ultimately, when you're talking about instant payments, and the flavor of RTP and what FedNow is going to deliver versus, some of the other payment systems that are a little less final and a little less immediate. Part of the nature of that is that, it's essentially like handing somebody a $100 bill if you send them $100 through RTP. You are putting that money, taking it out of your account and putting it in their account in real time. And so because of there's lots of value behind that finality and that certainty and that immediacy, both on the sender and on the receiving end. But there's also a different type of risk associated with that you need to make sure you're mindful of and mitigating. And that's, ensuring that the person you're sending the money to is the person you're intending to send the money to, and that it's a legitimate person who you legitimately need to pay.
So I'm gonna net this out for Payments Feud. This person thinks that somehow fraud is different or changes in some way with respect to RTP. Reed Luhtanen says, no, fraud's fraud. Fraud's fraud, and you got other issues that you got to worry about because it's RTP, but in general, fraud is fraud. Okay, so I love one of the comments in the chat, so I just have to read this out because this is quite frankly, I think of myself, and I am a dad, as a lover of dad jokes. This goes in that category of dad jokes. I'm sorry to our chat person who put this in here, who I don't actually know, so I shouldn't pick on him, but I love this. Instead of nostro and vostro, he's suggesting we call it mistra and ustra, and I love that. I just think that's fantastic. I'm gonna steal that. I'm gonna steal that unashamedly. Nostro and vostro to mistra and ustra. Oh, it's great. Okay, back to the questions. Back to the serious work. No more great dad jokes. Next question came in back in the interoperability category, which we'll cover off, and then we're going to switch to the future. So everybody start thinking future thoughts. What's going to happen? See if you can pin Reed down on some prognostications of some sort. So this question is, does international interoperability, so we've talked a lot about interoperability today. It's a hot topic. A lot of misconceptions. We had to push the no button several times, which was fun for me. But in this question is, does international interoperability fall into the Faster Payment Council's mandate? And if so, how would you prioritize international alignment or ability for real-time payment success with both FedNow and TCH? Is that a 1 to 2 year thing, a 2 to 5 year thing, a 5 to 10 year thing, or there's a last choice, which is 10 year plus, which I think of as like heat death of the universe. I think that's very long term, decade plus. I can't think that long, far ahead. Anyway, so that's the question. Does international interoperability fall into the Faster Payment Council's mandate? And then we talk about priorities and timelines. Over to you.
So I guess, mandate is an interesting word, but it's certainly, I'd say, part of our remit to look at that space and figure out how can we assist the market in terms of cross-border. So I guess I'll use the term cross-border, not necessarily international interoperability. Okay. I think that makes it a little easier for us to, sort of make sure we're all talking about the same thing, because interoperability you have to read our white paper before you really can understand it.
Oh, another plug for the white paper. Good.
FasterPaymentsCouncil.org.
Well done. Very well done.
Was that subtle? I think
it was very subtle. I almost didn't catch it. That's why we stopped, to kind of make sure everybody else caught up. Perfect.
So when you're talking about cross-border, there are a whole host of issues that are even layered on top of the issues we haven't solved when it comes to domestic, cross connectivity and interoperability of networks. And so we do have a work group that recently launched that is beginning to do the work of sort of unpacking all of the things that are related to cross-border and how we would make cross-border transactions, possible and successful for faster payment solutions. Now, I think in terms of, what's the timeline for that? I mean, I guess I'll take the 5 to 10.
5 to 10. Okay. Not the heat death of the universe one, but just before the last choice there.
Certainly not in the, I think, I guess not, it depends on what you mean by this thing being successful, right? But I think, if you're talking about, will there be cross-border payments initiated through what we're calling faster payments? I mean, probably, yeah. I mean, that's, for sure there are going to be people who need that to happen and they're going to figure it out. And that's one of the beauties of, having a lot of different folks in the space working on this and trying to figure out what are these solutions. And we've got some really creative members of the FPC like Ripple, and others who are really, sort of locking in on that. And they probably would say, hey, we're already doing cross-border faster payments. So maybe I should just say,
they say all sorts of things. Yeah, no, that's good. That's good. We know those Ripple guys.
Yeah. So, I think it's absolutely something that we need to be focused on as an industry, and we need all the voices from the different parts of the industry at the table to figure this stuff out, to make sure that ultimately what we arrive at is something that works for merchants and for financial institutions and the technology providers in between.
All right. Reed Luhtanen says, yes, international interoperability is a thing, and it's on the roadmap, and there's a working group getting started, and he chose the almost last timescale. So future, which is a perfect transition. Wow. It's like this whole thing is scripted, or as if I knew what I was doing, which of course, neither of those two things is true. Okay, so in the future, put on your hat, the special hat, right? On Johnny Carson, there was a bit the special hat. I don't remember what the great Karnak. Karnak, yes, thank you. The great Karnak. That was it. That was a good bit. I like that bit.
Before my time, but
stop it. That I'm just giving you a buzz. I'm not supposed to do that to you, but I just did that to you. Okay, so we've got one question that just came in about the future, which I think is fun because it just starts more shots fired. How do you prevent the MasterCards and Visas of the world? I think there's a MasterCard and a Visa in the world, so I think it's kind of fun that we think that there are more. I guess there's a Chinese Union Pay. There's a few others. Carte Bancaire. There's a couple. But anyways, how do you prevent the MasterCards and Visas of the world from acquiring even more leading solutions and achieving payments world domination? I think they already have, actually. But how do you prevent that?
So first, I'll note that Visa and MasterCard are both members of the Faster.
I knew you were going to say that. I kind of like that. I was kind of building that up a little bit because I knew you were going to have to say that. I didn't check, but I was pretty sure.
Yeah, they are. And what? I guess what I would say
is you hate every minute you have to spend with them.
They're lovely. And honestly, I guess in all seriousness, what I would say is, what I've seen from them is a high level of investment in the things that we're trying to achieve at the Faster Payments Council. So, they are present. They have members in almost all of our work groups. They're on our board of directors. They are invested in ensuring that their voice is heard as this all progresses. And so I guess what I would say is, that's fantastic. First of all, we love to have them in the membership and at the work groups. I would also say, I think if you're looking to influence the course of events and how things change over the next few years, the best way to do that is to likewise come and engage and be part of the solution and be part of the process that results in the outcomes, because that's what we're all about.
All right, so I think I'm going to say Reed Luhtanen says, not trying to prevent world domination. Everybody can have world domination. You just have to show up at the working groups, right? Like that's kind of the thing. Please keep firing back in the Q&A, clap back in the chat. You guys are doing a really, really good job. We just got a couple more questions, and we'll be wrapping up here in just a few minutes. So if you've had something on your mind that's just kind of burning in your battle sense, then just let it go. Let it rip. Okay, so regarding RTP in the future, do you feel like that it will be offered as a payment method in different channels, especially online and mobile? And I think when I read this, I think different means different than the banks.
Yeah, absolutely. I think and I think I've covered this a little bit, but I think there are all kinds of use cases that the providers and the financial institutions who are offering them are open to enabling. I think, back to one of the, another reason for the question about, why would banks be interested in this when, they've got all this revenue coming in from the interchange side. And I think part of the answer to that is they need to be providing for their customers the services that their customers are demanding in the marketplace. Otherwise, somebody else is going to offer that, and their customers are going to go to that somebody else. And so I think there's a real threat to financial institutions from emerging fintechs and challenger banks that they're starting to understand, and they're starting to see that the way to respond to that threat is by becoming, more digital, more tech forward, offering solutions that encourage customers to use their app and keep their deposits, frankly, in that bank, rather than turning those deposits over to another bank or to a fintech who would control, a pool of deposits and decide where they're put. So there's, if you don't have deposits, it doesn't really matter if you would get interchange income if you don't have any customers.
All right. So is RTP only for banks? Reed Luhtanen says, no, there's a whole ecosystem here, and a bunch of different channels that will support that ecosystem. So I think that's really, really good. All right. I don't see more questions rolling in. We've just got a couple more minutes and a couple more questions. We actually had a whole bunch submitted ahead of time, so I'm going through and picking capriciously which ones I feel like asking. There we go. Now we got a great question firing in. If I wanted some shots fired, which I do, so thank you very much. Why is it called the Faster Payments Council? One could argue that the U.S., that's a very formal way to start, that the U.S. is already very far behind in real-time payments adoption. Rather than focus on faster payments generically, we need a hard push and focus on real-time payments specifically, and stop worrying about ACH and others who can find their own place. Goodness. So that is a fascinating shots fired question. What do you say about adoption? And in fact, we had one that was submitted beforehand that was about adoption as well. So I think that's a key question. What will drive mass adoption? And I'll just add some of the comments from this question that was submitted earlier, which was, hey, you know what? In a lot of other places, the UK, India, Thailand, Australia, a bunch of others, Canada actually, a little different there, but there was a regulatory thing, right? So a bunch of places where they're way ahead of us, which is that chat-based question, live fire question. There was a regulatory thing. Adoption's kind of behind. I have to agree with that. It's definitely behind here in the U.S. I'm just going to stop talking and let you go.
All right. First of all, I'd like to comment on your pronunciation. You said it was a very formal opening. You said rather. You're kind of like you're going into this this affect. So
all right, my Canadian is showing. I am a member of the Commonwealth. The language is owned by Her Majesty the Queen.
There you go.
I believe she pronounces it rather, which then makes it correct. So yeah. Canadians want to be more British than the British. That's a thing. A little bit of I don't know. Tea time growing up, very formal Canadian grandparent background. Moving on. Sorry is pronounced with an O. Also, the Boro has an O in it. There's several things. House and about can also be mispronounced by my friends here in America, my adopted country, where all 4 of my children were born. So anyways, that's me nationally and pronunciation-wise. Thanks for bringing it up.
I didn't know it was touching on a.
Yeah, no, I've heard about this before, Reed. This has come up, but keep going.
So I guess my response to that, to the question is, I think there will be a place for all these different payment types. I think you look back, there's still millions and millions of people writing checks and using cash and all these different, quote unquote, outdated, methods of payment are still widely used. And part of the reason for that is they're truly ubiquitous in ways that quote unquote 21st century payment system yet has achieved. And so I think it's going to be a long time before, we just, shove ACH to the side. But I think that, so I guess my initial reaction is that, it's wrong to say that we should be ignoring, the ACHs and things like that in favor of the more modern payment systems. Now, that being said, I do agree that we need to be leaning in heavily and getting the right voices at the table to build out these solutions to make it so you have a full suite that meets the needs of the folks who are looking to use them, right? So building out the QR codes, the APIs, the different messaging protocols that allow for standing order payments, making sure that the right fraud controls are in place for the different use cases. All that stuff is critical and something that we definitely need to be leaning into. And that's the kind of work that we're trying to do at the Faster Payments Council.
All right. So I think I heard you say that you're forming a super PAC in order to create a regulatory mandate through Congress. Is that what you just said?
No.
Oh. All right. So that's not it. You're not going after the regulatory push in the same way. But I hear you. It takes a village. There's a lot of different elements here. Okay. I think there's one question I'm going to save to the very, very end. Thank you for the question. Oh, wait a second. Yes. Okay. Here's a comment coming in from the chat. If you speak to Steve, that would be a Mr. Ledford at the clearinghouse. He would say that each payment rail is good for different things. Example, ACH is very low cost processing rail that's good for batch, which is exactly true. Mr. Ledford says a lot of things, some of which you definitely have to be careful of and ignore. All right, last serious question, and then I'm leaving the stinger. We're going to close on a great up note. I'm warning you, Reed, it is a stinger. There's a question coming straight for your forehead that you're, I don't know. It's because of the Canadian crack. I otherwise wouldn't have entertained it, but now I'm totally open to this. And thank you, Mr. Ellert, for...
I didn't know.
No, you did. You totally did. Okay, so here's the softball before the stinger comes. Which value-added and overlay services are Faster Payments Council members most interested in developing on top of the RTP infrastructure? And I think you've touched on a lot of these things, but this will give you a moment to summarize. You can do whatever plugs you're going to do, and then brace for it because it's coming for you, buddy.
Oh, I would never do a shameless plug, but
yes, you would. Yes, you would. You've done it several times already. But that's okay. Go ahead.
All right. So I think there are a number of different things that that folks are focused on, and frankly, a lot of it depends on which segment of our membership they're coming from. That being said, there's a lot of energy, and I've mentioned it a few times, around the QR code concept, around how do we come up with an approach that can be used commonly across many, many use cases and across many different tech platforms in terms of being agnostic as to whether it's an iOS or Android or any other operating system, as long as it's a device that can scan a QR code. So that's one that's getting a lot of traction. Hearing some chatter about APIs, I might have mentioned that before, but the ability to really link together in the background the experience you have through a customer-facing retail or service or hospitality app of some sort, and the mobile banking app that's also present on the phone, and connecting those to create a seamless experience that allows for the customer to do what they want to do efficiently. And then things like standing order payments to enable we're all using Netflix, and we have all these subscriptions now that we're never leaving our homes.
Never again.
Every month, $9.95, goes out of your account. Obviously, today a lot of those are supported through credit debit cards, and that's great. But there's an opportunity there for more folks potentially to get onboarded onto those services if Faster Payments could support a standing order. I mentioned this also, the idea around point of origination. How do we really flesh out the discussion around some of these overlay services that are in the market? Like Zelle is a great example of a point of origination interoperability solution, and helping folks understand these different overlays that are out there and how they can help support interoperability of Faster Payments. And then, we talked about this in depth before, but, different services and add-ons that would help ensure the security of the transactions and the apps to make sure that ultimately faster payments doesn't mean faster fraud.
Nice. All right. Well, Reed Luhtanen says, yeah, there's all kinds of value-added services that the Faster Payments Council is working on, hence the Faster Payments Council and your purpose. So the last question goes to our most engaged, in fact, diligent member of the Payments Geek Roundtable today. And I'm going to go ahead and call you out, Mr. Ellert. Charles Ellert asks, do you plan to translate the About section on fasterpaymentscouncil.org into English? My Latin is not up to speed.
Oh, that's not cool, Chuck.
Oh, that makes me so happy. I have a feeling somebody who's working on web pages will get an email here shortly about translating that from Latin into English.
I'm gonna have to read that. I'm gonna have to read that from the website.
Had to ask. Charles says had to ask, which is perfect. Thank you very much for that. That's a perfect way to end this week's session of the Payments Geek Roundtable. Thank you for playing along, Reed. You're a great sport. We really appreciate the good work that you're doing to bring the U.S. hopefully into this century and or millennium with the faster payments. We know that that's the good work. And we'll get a recap blog up for those of you who just want to relive the moment. You'll probably be able to look through some of the video stuff as we post all that online. Thanks again, Reed. Really appreciate you joining us today.
Thank you so much. Thanks for bringing this group together. That's what it's all about.
Oh, rude. So rude. All right. Take care.